Let's start off this chapter with a theory of vitalism. The interesting thing about this theory is that it is false. It's a falsified theory. This means that it was once thought to be correct, but there's no scientific evidence for it. The theory states that living things need a so-called vital force. It's a force of life. And they thought that living things are different from non-living things in that living things have this so-called force of life, the vital force, which was not found. The theory also states that organic chemicals, organic substances, these are those substances that contain carbon and can be oxidized. It's a side information that organic chemicals can only be produced by living things. And if you think about it, it does make intuitive sense. I mean, for example, plastic. Plastic is an organic substance. It contains carbon. It's combustible, so it means it can be burned as well. But where does plastic come from? Well, plastic is made from fossil fuels like oils and gas. And where do they come from? Well, these are many years ago fossilized plants. They were turned into these fossil fuels. And so even plastic, being organic, has a living background, if you want to think about it like that. So they thought, well, all organic substances can only be produced by living things, and this theory was thought to be correct until in 1828, a person called Friedrich Wöhler, he basically synthesized urea artificially. And this is an organic substance. And over here I have a chemical formula for urea. You have over here crystallized urea in a bottle. And it can be artificially made. Urea is a waste product of mammals. So that's a nitrogen waste product. So it's also synthesized by humans, of course, and excreted over the urine. But it can also be made artificially. So simply by being able to make urea artificially, he was able to falsify or disprove vitalism. One proof that it's, how shall I say, one piece of evidence is enough to falsify the whole theory. You might now wonder where over here is the carbon, because being organic, there should be carbon somewhere. Well, the carbon is over here, but it's not drawn, because every time when you have a corner, and if you do not, you don't have to draw the C because it's implied. So it is an organic substance, and it was also artificially made. So we move on here. So what is now molecular biology and biochemistry? These are somewhat related terms. Basically, molecular biology and biochemistry attempt to explain living processes from a chemical viewpoint. So when you go out to university and you study molecular biology, you deal a lot about analyzing the DNA of organisms. You deal about analyzing proteins and so on. In biochemistry, there's a big overlap here, but biochemistry focuses a little bit more on the biochemical pathways. How are substances converted inside a cell from one form to another form? So why is this of relevancy or of interesting? Just background information. A few hundred years ago, during the Age of Enlightenment, this is basically the time when people started to think rationally about the world. People also started to think rationally about, of course, biology and the other sciences. And at that time, the researchers and scientists, when they were doing explorations, what they did is when they found a new animal, they basically for example, they went on an expedition somewhere, a couple of months on a boat, and they discovered a new continent, discovered new animals. What did they do with the animals? Well, they killed the animal, they dissected the animal, and they weighed the organs. and then they removed the organs and then they stuffed the animal and brought it back to their home country, and then they put it into a museum, and then people could actually see it. That's basically how biology or science was done a few hundred years ago. So they tried to classify and sort and organize the living environment this way. Nowadays, when you want to discover a new organism, you do not want to kill it because it's ethically problematic, but what they do is they take a blood sample and do some DNA analysis. So that is basically the new way, or the modern way of looking at living things. It's the chemical or biochemical viewpoint, and not so much descriptive anymore. Okay, so that was basically a brief introduction into these three terms over here.